The Music Box's Secret, Chapter 1. My Aunt Evelyn was an enigma. She lived a quiet, solitary life in a small, cluttered apartment filled with antiques and the scent of old paper. She wasn't married, had no children, and her connection to the rest of our family felt tenuous, a thin thread stretched across years of unspoken distance. My contact with her was limited to the occasional holiday card and a brief, formal phone call once or twice a year. She was simply Aunt Evelyn, a relative on the periphery of my life, a woman I knew little about. When she passed away at the age of 88, it was less a sudden shock and more a quiet, expected closing of a distant chapter. I'm Clara. I'm 60 years old, a retired librarian, my children grown and living their own lives. My husband passed away a few years ago, leaving me with the quiet rhythm of widowhood. Sorting through Aunt Evelyn's apartment fell to me, her only niece and closest living relative. It was a task I approached with a sense of duty, a way of honoring the memory of a woman I barely knew. Her apartment was like a museum of forgotten things. Every surface was covered with antique objects, dusty and silent, each holding a potential story I knew nothing about. As I began the daunting task of sorting through her belongings, I felt like an archaeologist, unearthing the remnants of a life lived privately, filled with things that held meaning only to her. Amongst the antique furniture, the stacks of old books, the boxes of forgotten photographs, one object stood out. It was a music box sitting on her dusty dresser. It was old, made of dark wood, inlaid with mother of pearl in an intricate floral pattern. It looked delicate and beautiful, almost out of place in the clutter. I picked it up, the wood smooth and cool under my fingers. I turned the small key on the side, and with a faint click, the lid lifted. A tiny ballerina figurine twirled slowly as a haunting, unfamiliar melody filled the air. The music was beautiful, melancholic, evoking a sense of longing and quiet sorrow. It resonated deep within me, stirring something I couldn't name, a strange sense of familiarity, a feeling of having heard it before, though I knew I hadn't. As I watched the tiny ballerina twirl, my gaze fell on the inner lid of the music box. Almost invisible against the dark wood was a faint inscription, etched so subtly it was easily missed. I leaned closer, tilting the box to catch the light. It was a date, April 12th, 1965, and beneath the date, 3 initials, SM and EA. April 12th, 1965, my 25th birthday. SM and EA. Who were they? And why were their initials and my birthday inscribed in Aunt Evelyn's music box? A sense of unease began to settle over me. This wasn't just an antique music box. It held a hidden meaning, a connection to a specific date in my life, to 2 sets of initials, and to my mysterious Aunt Evelyn. I examined the music box more closely, searching for anything else unusual. As my fingers traced the intricate mother-of-pearl inlay, I noticed a small, almost invisible seam in the wood along the bottom edge. I pressed gently, and with a soft click, a narrow drawer slid out from the base of the music box. My heart pounded in my chest. A hidden compartment. What further secrets did this music box hold? Inside the drawer, nestled on a faded velvet lining, were 2 items. a small, tarnished silver locket on a delicate chain, and a tiny, folded piece of paper. I picked up the locket first. It was cool and heavy in my hand. I opened it. Inside, tarnished but still visible, were two miniature photographs. Two young faces, smiling at the camera. A young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Someone who looked vaguely familiar, but whom I couldn't place. And a baby, a tiny infant, swaddled in a blanket, his eyes wide and curious. The young woman and a baby. Who were they? And why were their photos in a locket hidden inside Aunt Evelyn's music box, inscribed with my birthday and those initials? Then I unfolded the small piece of paper. It was old, fragile, covered in my Aunt Evelyn's distinctive handwriting, but younger, less shaky. "My dearest Clara," the note began. It was for me. If you are reading this, it means I was unable to tell you myself. The truth is heavy, Clara, a burden I have carried for many years. The music box holds a secret, a story I was sworn to keep. The date on the lid, April 12th, 1965, is not just your birthday. It is the day the music stopped. SM and EA are the initials of two souls whose lives were intertwined with yours, with mine, with a secret I was tasked with protecting. The young woman in the locket is Sarah Miller. The baby is yours. The truth was hidden, Clara, to protect you, to protect the family. A difficult choice was made, a sacrifice. The music box holds their memory. The melody, it was hers. It was yours. A lullaby. Understand the truth, Clara. Find the answers. And perhaps you can find the peace that eluded us. With love and a heavy heart, Aunt Evelyn. My world tilted on its axis. The note fluttered to the floor, landing on the dusty rug. The music box, the haunting melody, the locket with the photos of a young woman and a baby, the date, the initials, it all converged, pointing to an impossible, earth-shattering truth. The baby in the locket was mine. April 12th, 1965, my 25th birthday. A day I remembered, of course, but not as the day the music stopped. I had been a young woman, working, living a simple life. I had never been pregnant. I had never had a baby. The young woman in the locket, Sarah Miller. The initials, SM. Her initials, EA. Aunt Evelyn's initials. Evelyn Anderson, yes. The note was clear, devastatingly clear. Aunt Evelyn believed the baby in the locket was mine. That something happened on my 25th birthday, April 12th, 1965. The day the music stopped. A day connected to Sarah Miller and to Aunt Evelyn. A secret was kept. A sacrifice. Had I had a baby? A baby I had no memory of? Due to trauma? An accident? A difficult choice made by others? The music box continued to play its melancholic tune, a haunting lullaby for a child I didn't know I had. A child whose life began with a secret, a sacrifice, a lie. My quiet, ordinary life was suddenly ripped open, revealing a hidden past, a lost child, a secret buried so deep I didn't even know it existed. Chapter 2.1. The revelation that the baby in the locket might be mine, that my life held a secret so profound I had no memory of it, was shattering. My Aunt Evelyn's note, the cryptic message in the music box, the date, the initials. It all pointed to a hidden past, a lost child, a truth that had been deliberately concealed. How could I have had a baby without knowing it? Was it due to illness, an accident, a difficult emotional event that caused amnesia? Or was it something else entirely? A decision made by others to keep the truth from me? The young woman in the locket, Sarah Miller, was connected to the secret. Her initials, SM, on the music box lid, intertwined with EA, Aunt Evelyn Anderson. Was Sarah Miller the baby's mother? And Aunt Evelyn the one who facilitated the arrangement? But Aunt Evelyn's note said, the baby is yours. Yours, meaning mine, Clara. The labyrinth of potential truths and agonizing possibilities was overwhelming. If the baby was indeed mine, who was Sarah Miller, and what was her role in this secret? Was she the baby's biological mother, and I, the adoptive mother? Or was the situation even more complex? The date, April 12th, 1965, my 25th birthday, the day the music stopped. What significant event happened on that day that connected me to a baby and a secret? I knew I had to find out more. I had to uncover the full story behind the music box, the locket, the baby, and the cryptic note. My Aunt Evelyn had entrusted me with this secret, this legacy of unspoken truth, and I felt a profound need to understand it, to bring the hidden story into the light. My search began by trying to identify Sarah Miller. The initials SM and EA on the music box lid suggested a connection between Sarah Miller and Aunt Evelyn Anderson. Were they friends? Relatives? Where did Sarah Miller live? I searched through Aunt Evelyn's belongings again, more meticulously this time, looking for any further clues about Sarah Miller. Any letters, photographs, or documents that might mention her name. I found old address books, photo albums, boxes of correspondence. In one old photo album, I found a photograph of my Aunt Evelyn with a young woman, a woman who bore a striking resemblance to the young woman in the locket. On the back of the photo, in Aunt Evelyn's handwriting, were the words, Summer 1964. What was her connection to Aunt Evelyn? And how was she connected to a baby that Aunt Evelyn claimed was mine? My research into Aunt Evelyn's past revealed that she had spent some time living away from our hometown in the mid-1960s, in a quiet coastal town several hours away. The reason for her absence was always vague, attributed to personal matters. Could her time there be connected to Sarah Miller and the secret? I decided to visit that coastal town. Perhaps the answers lay there, in the place where Aunt Evelyn spent her time in the months leading up to my 25th birthday. The town was small, insular, filled with the quiet rhythm of coastal life. It felt like a place where secrets could be kept, where past events could be easily buried beneath the shifting sands of time. I visited the local historical society, the town library, looking for any records that might mention Aunt Evelyn Anderson or a young woman named Sarah Miller, who was present in the town in late 1964 or early 1965. The records from that time were limited, but I found a few mentions of Aunt Evelyn living in a rented cottage on the outskirts of town. I also spoke to older residents, people who had lived in the town for many years, hoping to find someone who remembered Aunt Evelyn or a young woman named Sarah Miller who might have been with her. The residents were friendly but guarded. their memories often vague or colored by time. Some remembered Aunt Evelyn, the quiet woman who kept to herself in the rented cottage. No one seemed to recall a young woman named Sarah Miller being with her. The silence surrounding Sarah Miller felt significant. Was she from this town? Or had she come here with Aunt Evelyn, perhaps seeking refuge, seeking a place to hide a secret? My search hit a roadblock. The official records offered no clear path to identifying Sarah Miller or her connection to Aunt Evelyn or the events of 1965. The memories of the town residents were too vague, too incomplete. The mystery of the baby, of my potential connection to him, remained. Was the baby Sarah Miller's? And was I involved in some way that led Aunt Evelyn to believe the baby was mine? Or was the note misleading, a cryptic message whose meaning I was misinterpreting? The haunting melody of the music box played in my mind, a constant reminder of the secret, the lost child, the unknown truth that was hidden within the layers of the past. I knew I had to keep searching, to uncover the full story, to understand the secrets that had been kept from me for a lifetime. Chapter 2.2, The Search for Sarah Miller and the Meaning of the Music Box Inscription was proving challenging. The coastal town where Aunt Evelyn lived in the mid-1960s offered few clues, the official records silent, the memories of the older residents vague and incomplete. The mystery of the baby, of my potential connection to him, remained shrouded in the cryptic message left by my Aunt Evelyn. I returned to Aunt Evelyn's apartment, hoping to find more clues in her belongings, anything that might shed light on Sarah Miller, on the events of 1965. I went through every box, every drawer, meticulously examining every item. I found more old photographs, letters, diaries from different periods of her life, but nothing that explicitly mentioned Sarah Miller or the secret of the baby. Then, while going through a box of old papers in her closet, I found a small, locked journal, its cover worn and faded. It was different from her other journals, older, its lock intricate and unfamiliar. I didn't have a key. The mystery of the locked journal felt significant. What secrets did it hold? Did it contain the answers I was searching for? I took the journal to a locksmith, who was able to open it carefully without damaging the delicate lock. Inside, the pages were filled with my Aunt Evelyn's handwriting, but younger, filled with the emotional intensity of a past time. The entries were from the early to mid-1960s, the period leading up to and following April 1965. Her entries from late 1964 and early 1965 were filled with worry, with concern for someone named Sarah. She wrote about Sarah being in trouble, about a difficult situation she was facing, about needing to get her away to a safe place. The coastal town was mentioned as a place of refuge. Then, the entries spoke of a baby. Sarah was pregnant, alone and scared, her family having rejected her. Aunt Evelyn had taken her in, brought her to the coastal cottage to hide her pregnancy from the judgment of society, from the shame it would bring upon Sarah and her family. March 10th, 1965. Sarah is due any day now. We are ready, as ready as we can be. The cottage is small, but it is safe, hidden. No one here knows her story. No one knows our secret. I pray the birth goes smoothly. She's so young, so vulnerable. I worry for her, for the baby. Aunt Evelyn's entries confirmed that the baby was Sarah Miller's, born out of wedlock, in a time when such a thing brought immense shame and societal rejection. Aunt Evelyn had bravely taken her in, offered her sanctuary, a place to give birth in secret. Then the entries from April 1965. April 12th, 1965. The baby was born today, a healthy baby boy. Sarah is exhausted, but she is well. He is beautiful, tiny, perfect, but the future is so uncertain. What will become of them? Sarah is alone. She cannot provide for him, not here, not openly. We talked about the options, difficult options. The decision must be made soon. April 12th, 1965, my 25th birthday. The day the music stopped, the day the baby was born. It wasn't about me having a baby I didn't know about. It was about Sarah Miller giving birth to a baby boy on my birthday. A baby my Aunt Evelyn helped hide. A baby whose future was uncertain. But why did Aunt Evelyn's note say, the baby is yours. Yours, Clara. The entries continued, detailing the difficult discussions about the baby's future. Adoption seemed to be the only option, a way to give the baby a chance at a stable life, away from the shame and hardship his young mother faced. April 20th, 1965. The arrangements are being made. Quietly, discreetly. A family has been found. A good family, they say. They will provide a loving home. Sarah is heartbroken. It is tearing her apart to give him up. But she knows it is for the best, for his future. I pray she is right. The papers will be signed soon. The baby will be gone. Our secret will be safe. The baby was given up for adoption. That was the secret. A difficult, heartbreaking choice made by a young mother, facilitated by my courageous Aunt Evelyn to give her baby a chance at a better life. But why did Aunt Evelyn's note claim the baby was mine? Was it a misunderstanding? Or was there another layer to this secret, a connection to me that I was still unaware of? The music box, the haunting melody, the locket with the photos of Sarah and the baby, they were all connected to this story. The melody, the lullaby, perhaps sung to the baby by Sarah or Aunt Evelyn. The locket holding their photos, a memento of a connection that had to be severed. The initials on the lid, SM, Sarah Miller, EA, Evelyn Anderson. And the date, my birthday, the date the baby was born. It was all a testament to this hidden event, this difficult choice, this secret kept buried for decades. My potential connection to the baby, hinted at in Aunt Evelyn's note, remained a mystery. Was there something about my life, my circumstances in 1965, that made Aunt Evelyn believe the baby was connected to me, even if he wasn't biologically mine? Or was there a biological link I was unaware of? The search for the baby, for the boy who was born on my 25th birthday and given up for adoption, became my new focus. Who was he? Where was he now? And how was I truly connected to his story? Chapter 3.1. The locked journal had revealed the core of the secret. Sarah Miller, a young woman facing an unwed pregnancy in 1965, found refuge in my Aunt Evelyn's coastal cottage, gave birth to a baby boy on my 25th birthday, and made the heartbreaking decision to give him up for adoption. The music box, the locket, the date, the initials, they were all connected to this hidden event, a secret guarded by my Aunt Evelyn for decades. But the mystery of my personal connection to the baby, hinted at in Aunt Evelyn's note, the baby is yours, remained. Was it a misunderstanding on her part? Or was there a biological link I was unaware of? My search now focused on finding the baby, the boy born on April 12th, 1965, and understanding my connection to him. Finding adoption records from the 1960s is challenging, as they are often sealed to protect the privacy of all parties involved. However, with the help of a professional genealogist and by demonstrating a potential family connection through Aunt Evelyn, I hope to access non-identifying information or potentially find a way to connect with the adopted child, now a man in his late 50s. I shared the story with the genealogist, the journals, the letters, the music box. The secret of Sarah Miller and the baby born on my birthday. She was deeply moved by the story and eager to help me in my search. We began by researching adoption agencies that were active in the coastal region or in the area where Aunt Evelyn lived in the mid-1960s. We looked for any records related to a male infant born on April 12, 1965, placed for adoption around that time. The search was complex, involving navigating old records and sometimes uncooperative institutions. While the genealogist focused on the adoption records, I continued to explore my own family history, looking for any potential connection to Sarah Miller or to the events of 1965 that might explain Aunt Evelyn's cryptic note. Sarah Miller was not the name I recognized from my family tree. Who was she, really? Was she related to me in some way I didn't know? I started researching the Miller family name in the coastal region, looking for any connection to my own family, the Andersons and the Vances, my mother's maiden name. The search was broad, yielding many results but no clear links. The initials on the music box lid, SM and EA, intertwined with the date April 12, 1965, felt like a deliberate message. SM was Sarah Miller. EA was Evelyn Anderson, my aunt. Was there a hidden meaning in the intertwined initials, a symbolic representation of their shared secret, their connection to the baby born on that specific date? As the genealogist delved into the adoption records, she uncovered something intriguing. While she couldn't directly access identifying information about the adopted child due to the sealed records, she found a record of a male infant born on April 12, 1965, in the coastal region, who was placed for adoption through a private agency. The record listed the biological mother as Sarah Miller, and listed as a person involved in the placement was Evelyn Anderson. This confirmed the details from Aunt Evelyn's journal. The record also contained some non-identifying information about the biological father. It was limited, but it stated that the father was also young, reportedly from a nearby town, and that his identity was not disclosed in the official records at the request of the biological mother. A young father from a nearby town. Could I have known him? Was he someone from my past? Could this be the connection Aunt Evelyn hinted at? The genealogist suggested that a DNA test might be the quickest way to confirm a biological connection, if one existed. A DNA test could potentially link me to the adopted child, or to Sarah Miller, or to the biological father, revealing a truth that had been hidden for decades. I decided to take a DNA test. The thought of potentially uncovering a hidden biological connection, a lost child, was both terrifying and exhilarating. I submitted my DNA sample to a commercial genealogy database, the results promising to reveal distant and close relatives based on shared DNA. While waiting for the DNA results, I continued to research Sarah Miller. The genealogist, using more specialized databases, found records of a Sarah Miller who had lived in a town near the coastal region in the mid-1960s, a young woman whose age aligned with the Sarah in Aunt Evelyn's journal. Her family was listed in the records. This was a breakthrough. I now had information about Sarah Miller's family, her parents, her siblings. I could potentially trace her life after 1965, find out what became of her, if she ever married, had other children. The wait for the DNA results felt interminable. Every day was filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. What secrets would my DNA reveal? Would it confirm a biological connection to the baby born on my 25th birthday? Would it uncover a hidden branch of my family tree I never knew existed? Chapter 3.2. The wait for the DNA results felt like an eternity, each day stretching into a week, each week carrying the weight of a lifetime of unspoken secrets. The possibility that my DNA would unlock a hidden truth about my origins or reveal a lost child I never knew I had was both terrifying and deeply compelling. Meanwhile, the genealogist's research into Sarah Miller's family and life after 1965 continued, slowly piecing together the story of the young woman who had given birth to the baby on my birthday. The genealogist found records indicating that Sarah Miller did not return to her hometown after giving birth in 1965. She moved to a different city, started a new life. She eventually married and had other children. She lived a quiet, respectable life, her past in the coastal town, her secret pregnancy, her baby given up for adoption, all carefully hidden from her new family, from the world. She had passed away several years ago. The chance to meet her, to hear her story from her own lips, was lost forever. But she had a family, children, David's half-siblings, who knew nothing about his existence. The silence surrounding Sarah Miller's life after 1965, the deliberate burying of her past, mirrored the secrecy surrounding the baby's adoption. It was clear that both Sarah and Aunt Evelyn had gone to great lengths to ensure that the secret remained hidden. Then the email arrived. The notification from the DNA database. My results were ready. My hands trembled as I clicked on the link, logging into my account. The results revealed many distant relatives, connections to branches of my family tree I was vaguely aware of. And then I saw it. A close match, a predicted relationship, close family, possible son or daughter. My heart stopped. Possible son or daughter. The person was listed as David. David, the baby from the locket. The baby born on April 12th, 1965. The prediction was possible son or daughter, which for someone my age, with a match this close, overwhelmingly points to a child. It was true. The baby in the locket was mine. I had had a baby, a son, on my 25th birthday, without knowing it. The shock was immense, a wave of disbelief and overwhelming emotion washing over me. How is this possible? How could I have given birth to a child and have no memory of it? The genealogist's research into Sarah Miller's family had already provided information about the biological father being from a nearby town, his identity not disclosed. My DNA results didn't directly reveal the father's identity, but they did provide clues. By comparing my DNA with other matches in the database, the genealogist was able to identify potential relatives on the father's side, tracing those connections back to a specific family in a town near the coastal region. The name of the family was familiar. It was a family I had known growing up, a family connected to people I had known, perhaps even dated. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together in a way that was both terrifying and profoundly revealing. My connection to the baby was biological. He was my son. The young woman in the locket Sarah Miller was not his mother, but someone else connected to his birth, and the biological father was likely someone from a family I knew, someone from my past. The realization that my own life, my own body, held a secret that had been hidden from me for 60 years was almost too much to bear. What had happened to me in 1965? Why did I have no memory of being pregnant, of giving birth? Was it an accident? An illness? Or was the truth even more complex and disturbing? The day the music stopped. April 12th, 1965. My birthday. The day my son was born. What happened on that day that caused me to lose all memory of it? I needed to understand. I needed to know the full story behind my son's birth, his adoption, and the reasons why the truth had been hidden from me for a lifetime. And I needed to connect with my son, David, the man I never knew existed, the man who was born on my 25th birthday, the man whose life had begun with a secret and a difficult choice made by others. Chapter 4.1. The DNA results had delivered an earth-shattering truth. David was my son. The baby in the locket, the child born on April 12, 1965, was biologically mine. This revelation, while bringing a profound sense of connection to the lost child, deepened the mystery of how I could have given birth without knowing it, without any memory of the pregnancy or the birth itself. The day the music stopped on my 25th birthday held a secret trauma, an event that had seemingly erased a monumental part of my life from my memory. My focus shifted from finding the baby to understanding the circumstances of his birth and adoption, and the reasons why the truth had been hidden from me. Aunt Evelyn's note. Filled with cryptic hints of a difficult choice and a sacrifice made to protect me and the family, held the key. The young woman in the locket, Sarah Miller, was clearly involved, as was Aunt Evelyn herself. I revisited Aunt Evelyn's journals, rereading the entries from early 1965 with a new, agonizing perspective. The entries spoke of Sarah Miller being pregnant, of bringing her to the coastal cottage to hide her condition. They spoke of the baby being born on April 12, 1965, and the heartbreaking decision to give him up for adoption. But the journals never explicitly stated that Sarah was the biological mother. They spoke of a baby born to a young woman, and Aunt Evelyn's role in facilitating the secret birth and adoption. My newfound knowledge, the DNA results confirming my biological connection, suggested a different interpretation of the journals, a truth Aunt Evelyn had carefully concealed even in her private writings. What if Sarah Miller wasn't the biological mother? What if I was, and Sarah was the young woman Aunt Evelyn brought to the cottage, not because she was pregnant, but for some other reason connected to my condition? Or was Sarah the biological mother and I was somehow involved in a way that led Aunt Evelyn to believe the baby was mine, or to claim he was mine to protect the real truth? The genealogist's research into the biological father's potential family, the family from a nearby town that was familiar to me, added another layer of complexity. Who was the father? Someone from that family? Someone I knew, perhaps even had a relationship with, around 1964 to 1965, a relationship that led to a pregnancy I didn't remember? The possibility that my memory of that period was incomplete or even deliberately suppressed was unsettling. What happened to me around my 25th birthday that could have caused such a profound amnesia? An accident? A severe illness? A traumatic event? I needed to understand what happened on April 12th, 1965, the day the music stopped, the day my son was born and given up for adoption, the day my memory of these events was seemingly erased. I decided to try and contact Sarah Miller's family, the family from the town near the coastal region. Sarah was gone, but her siblings or other relatives might have known something about her life in 1965, about her connection to Aunt Evelyn and the coastal cottage, about the events surrounding the birth and adoption. I contacted the genealogist again, asking for help in finding living relatives of Sarah Miller. We found a potential sibling, a sister named Mary, living in a different state. Reaching out to her felt like another step into the unknown, a potential disruption of a life that may have been built on a foundation of silence and carefully guarded secrets. I wrote a letter to Mary, introducing myself and explaining my connection to Aunt Evelyn Anderson and the coastal cottage. I mentioned finding Aunt Evelyn's journals and learning about her sister, Sarah Miller, and the events of 1965. I explained that I was trying to understand a hidden family history, and that I believed Sarah might have held some of the keys to that history. I was careful not to reveal the full truth about the baby and my connection initially, wanting to gauge her reaction and approach the sensitive topic gently. While waiting for a response from Mary, I also decided to investigate the possibility of a medical event that might have caused amnesia in 1965. I searched for records of hospitals in the area where I lived in 1965, looking for any record of me being admitted around my 25th birthday. Any mention of an accident, an illness, or a medical procedure that could explain the memory loss. The records from that era were often incomplete or difficult to access due to privacy regulations. The silence surrounding 1965 in my own life, the absence of any significant memories or family stories about that specific period, felt increasingly significant, a deliberate void created to conceal a painful truth. Chapter 4.2. The letter to Sarah Miller's sister Mary was a step into the unknown, a gamble on the possibility that she held a piece of the puzzle about 1965 and the secret of my son's birth. The waiting period was filled with anxiety, each day bringing a fresh wave of speculation and dread. Then a letter arrived. From Mary. Her handwriting was clear, but the tone was cautious, hesitant. She acknowledged my letter, my connection to Aunt Evelyn, and my questions about her sister, Sarah Miller, and the events of 1965. She wrote that Sarah rarely spoke of that period of her life, that it was a difficult time for her. She hinted that there were secrets, things the family didn't discuss openly. She didn't explicitly confirm or deny any knowledge of the baby or the adoption, but her response suggested that she was aware of something significant and hidden. She was willing to talk, she said, but she preferred to do so in person. She lived several states away. The possibility of meeting her, of potentially hearing more about Sarah and the events of 1965, felt like a crucial step in uncovering the full truth. I arranged to travel to meet Mary. The journey felt like a pilgrimage, a search for answers that had been hidden for 60 years. Meeting Mary was like meeting a ghost from the past, a tangible link to the woman in the locket, the woman who had been involved in the most significant and mysterious event of my life. Mary was an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. We sat in her quiet living room, filled with photos and mementos of her own life and family. I shared with her the story of the music box, the locket, Aunt Evelyn's note, the journals, and my DNA results, confirming that the baby was my son. I showed her the photograph of Sarah from the locket, the young woman she knew as her sister. Mary listened, her face a mask of disbelief and profound sadness. Tears welled up in her eyes as I spoke of the baby, of the adoption, of my Aunt Evelyn's role. She had known Sarah had gone away for a time in 1965, that there was a secret, a difficult period in her life, but she hadn't known the details. She hadn't known about the baby. Sarah was always a private person, Mary said, her voice trembling. She never spoke of what happened during that time, only that it was a very difficult time, a time she wanted to forget. She confirmed that Sarah had indeed spent time living in the coastal town in 1965, staying with a relative who had a cottage there. The relative, she said, was her mother's cousin, a woman named Evelyn, Aunt Evelyn Anderson. The connection between Sarah Miller and Aunt Evelyn Anderson was now clear. They were cousins, linked through their mother's side of the family. Aunt Evelyn had taken Sarah in, offered her sanctuary during a difficult and secret time in her life. But the secret of the baby, my son, remained. If the baby was mine, and Sarah was just the cousin who was present, what happened to me? What was my connection to the coastal cottage in 1965? Mary shared what little she knew about Sarah's life in 1965. Sarah had been working in a town near where I lived, a town with a significant hospital. She had faced some kind of personal crisis around the time of my 25th birthday, a crisis that led her to seek refuge with Aunt Evelyn on the coast. Mary didn't know the details of the crisis, only that it was serious and involved a period of time when Sarah was unable to care for herself. This new information, combined with my own memory gaps and the DNA results, began to paint a chilling picture. A personal crisis for Sarah, a time when she was unable to care for herself, a time when I was in a nearby town, a time coinciding with my 25th birthday and the birth of my son, a birth I had no memory of. Was Sarah's crisis somehow linked to mine? Was she present during an event that caused my amnesia and led to the birth and adoption of my son? The fragmented pieces of the puzzle were converging, pointing towards a traumatic event in 1965 that involved me, Sarah Miller, Aunt Evelyn, the coastal cottage, and the birth and adoption of my son. Chapter 5.1, The Meeting with Mary, Sarah Miller's sister, provided crucial missing pieces to the puzzle, confirming Sarah's presence in the coastal town in 1965, her connection to Aunt Evelyn, and the existence of a family secret surrounding that period. But the full truth of my involvement, the reason for my amnesia, the circumstances surrounding my son's birth and adoption, remained elusive, shrouded in the silence of 60 years and a deliberate cover-up. My focus shifted back to understanding the events of April 12, 1965, and the days leading up to it. What happened that day, or around that time, that could have caused a traumatic event, a period of memory loss, and an unexpected pregnancy and birth? I revisited the genealogist, sharing the new information from my meeting with Mary and my DNA results confirming that David was my son. We worked together to try and piece together a timeline of my life in early 1965, focusing on my whereabouts, my activities, any potential connection to Sarah Miller or the coastal town where my son was born. It was difficult to reconstruct that period accurately after 60 years. My own memories were fragmented and incomplete, especially regarding the months leading up to April 1965. My parents, who might have held some answers, were gone. My other relatives had no knowledge of this hidden history. The genealogist's research into my life in 1965, combined with the information from Sarah Miller's family and Aunt Evelyn's journals, began to reveal a hidden narrative. Records indicated that I had been ill for a period in early 1965, suffering from a severe fever and a period of disorientation. I had been hospitalized, not in my hometown, but in a hospital in a nearby city, the same city where Sarah Miller had been working at the time of my crisis. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a chilling picture. A severe illness, a high fever, disorientation, hospitalization, a period of memory loss, and a secret pregnancy culminating in a birth on my 25th birthday, a birth I had no memory of. My illness, the fever, the hospitalization, it could have caused memory loss. And in my vulnerable state, something happened, a pregnancy, a birth, a secret kept to protect me, to protect the family from scandal, from the difficult truth of a child born under traumatic or uncertain circumstances. Aunt Evelyn's entries about Sarah Miller being in crisis, unable to care for herself, at the same time as my own illness and hospitalization, suggested a possible connection. Was Sarah involved in my care during that time? Was she present during my hospitalization? Did she witness something, participate in something that led to the secret? The fragmented memories, the haunting melody of the music box, the feeling of a lost child, they were all connected to this hidden trauma, this period of my life that had been deliberately erased or suppressed. The identity of the biological father remained unknown, but the genealogist's research into the potential family from a nearby town, the family familiar to me, hinted at a connection to my past, perhaps a relationship I had before my illness and memory loss, a relationship that resulted in the pregnancy. The magnitude of the deception, the layers of secrecy, the choices made by my family and others to conceal the truth of my son's birth and his adoption was immense. It was a decision born of fear, of the desire to protect me from a painful truth, from the potential shame of an out-of-wedlock birth, especially one occurring under traumatic circumstances. But the secret, intended to protect, had also cost me dearly. It had cost me the knowledge of my son, the opportunity to raise him, the chance to know him, to be a mother to him. It had created a void in my life, a hidden grief I carried without knowing its source. The final piece of the puzzle, the full truth of what happened in the hospital in 1965, who was present, the exact circumstances of my son's birth and adoption, remained elusive. Aunt Evelyn was gone, taking the full story with her. Sarah Miller was gone, the only one left who might have witnessed something, who might have been involved, was the person who was with me during my illness and hospitalization, the person who was present during my son's birth. My son's biological father, if he knew, if he was involved. The genealogist's research into the potential father's family from the nearby town, the family I was familiar with, led to a potential identity. A young man from that family, someone I had known, who would have been the right age to be the father, and who had a connection to the area where I was hospitalized in 1965. His name was Thomas. Thomas Vance. Thomas Vance. The name resonated with a chilling familiarity. My first love, the man I had dated briefly before my illness in 1965. The man I had lost touch with after I recovered and moved away. Chapter 5.1. The name Thomas Vance, the man who was potentially my son's biological father, the man I had dated briefly before my illness in 1965, echoed in my mind, a chilling confirmation of a connection I hadn't fully grasped until that moment. The pieces of the puzzle were converging, forming a picture of a hidden past, a secret relationship, a traumatic event, and a life-altering consequence that had been deliberately concealed from me for 60 years. My relationship with Thomas Vance in 1965 was brief, a youthful romance that I remembered fondly, but vaguely, due to the memory loss surrounding my illness. We had drifted apart after I recovered. The circumstances of my illness and my subsequent move creating a natural distance. I never knew he was potentially the father of my child. The magnitude of the secret, the layers of deception orchestrated by my family and others to conceal the truth of my son's birth and adoption was immense. My severe illness, the fever, the hospitalization, the subsequent memory loss, it had created the perfect cover for a secret pregnancy and birth. My family, likely fearing the scandal of an out-of-wedlock child, especially one born under such circumstances, had intervened with the help of Aunt Evelyn and perhaps others to ensure the baby was given up for adoption, and the truth was hidden from me, from the world. Aunt Evelyn's presence in the coastal cottage, Sarah Miller's presence in the nearby town, their connection to my hospitalization. It was all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to handle a difficult and potentially scandalous situation. A plan that resulted in my son being given up for adoption, and my memory of these events being erased or suppressed. The music box, the haunting melody, the locket with the photos of Sarah Miller and my son. The date, April 12th, 1965, my birthday, the day the music stopped. They were all reminders of this hidden trauma, this lost life, this secret I was finally uncovering. The melody, perhaps a lullaby, sung to my son by Sarah or Aunt Evelyn. The locket, a memento of a connection they had to sever. My son David was now in his 60s, a man who had lived his life unaware of his biological mother, unaware of the dramatic circumstances of his birth and adoption. My responsibility now felt clear. I needed to connect with him, to share the truth with him, to give him the answers he had been unknowingly searching for his entire life. And I needed to understand the full scope of what happened in 1965, the role of Thomas Vance, the reasons behind the elaborate cover-up, the extent of my family's involvement. Finding Thomas Vance after 60 years was another step into the unknown. His life, like mine, had moved on. He had likely built a family, a life unaware of the hidden consequence of our brief relationship in 1965. I contacted the genealogist again, sharing the potential identity of my son's father, Thomas Vance. We searched for his current whereabouts, his life after 1965. We found records suggesting he had married, had children, and was living in a different part of the state. He was still alive. Reaching out to Thomas felt daunting. How do you confront a man from your distant past with the news that you had a son together? A son you knew nothing about. A son who was given up for adoption, all due to a secret kept for 60 years. I decided to write him a letter, similar to the approach I had taken with David and Mary. I introduced myself, reminded him of our connection in 1965, and explained that I had recently uncovered some hidden family history related to that time. I mentioned my severe illness and memory loss around my 25th birthday, and the subsequent discovery of information suggesting I had a son born on that date. A son who was given up for adoption. I explained my DNA results and the evidence pointing to him as the likely biological father. I was careful not to accuse, but to convey the truth I had uncovered and my desire to understand the full story. I included my contact information. Sending the letter felt like sending another ripple through the still waters of the past. The waiting period was filled with intense anxiety and anticipation. How would he react? Would he remember 1965 differently? Would he deny everything? Or would he confirm the terrible truth? Then a phone call, an unknown number. My heart pounded. I answered. "Clara? Is that Clara?" The voice was male, older now, but with a familiar resonance. "Thomas. Thomas," I said, my voice trembling. "Yes, it's Clara." "I got your letter," he said, his voice quiet, filled with emotion. "Clara, I don't know what to say." Chapter 5.2. The voice of Thomas Vance, the man from my past, the man who was potentially my son's biological father, filled the silence, a link to a hidden history I was finally bringing into the light. His voice was filled with a mix of shock, regret, and perhaps relief that the secret was finally being revealed. We talked for a long time that first call, and in many conversations that followed. Thomas's story, his memory of 1965, confirmed the agonizing truth. He remembered our brief relationship, the fear and uncertainty when I became ill, the confusion surrounding my hospitalization and subsequent memory loss. He confirmed that my family, fearing scandal and believing it was for my own good given my fragile state, had orchestrated the entire situation. They had kept him away, told him I needed time to recover, and then, without his full knowledge or consent, facilitated the birth and adoption of our son, ensuring that the truth was hidden from both of us. He had been told the baby was stillborn, or perhaps that the pregnancy had not come to term. He had believed what my family told him, that it was a difficult period, a time to move on. He had lived his life for 60 years unaware that he had a son who was given up for adoption, a son who was born on my 25th birthday. The depth of the deception, the control exercised by my family to bury the truth and shape our lives was immense. It was a decision born of fear, of the societal pressures of the time, of a misguided belief that they were protecting me, protecting the family name, the music box, the haunting melody, the locket with the photos of Sarah Miller and my son, the date April 12th, 1965, the initials SM and EA, my Aunt Evelyn's note. It all made sense now. Sarah Miller was likely present during my hospitalization, perhaps helping Aunt Evelyn, witnessing the birth, carrying the locket as a memento of the baby. Aunt Evelyn, the keeper of the secret, had left the music box as a way to reveal the truth after her passing, a final act of conscience, trusting that I would uncover the story. My son, David, was a man in his 60s, living a life unaware of his biological father, unaware of the dramatic circumstances of his birth and adoption. Sharing the truth with him, connecting him with Thomas, his biological father, was the final crucial step in this extraordinary journey. I spoke with David again, sharing the new information about his biological father, Thomas Vance, and the circumstances of 1965. David was overwhelmed, emotional. The missing piece of his identity, the question of his father, was finally answered. Arranging a meeting between David and Thomas was a delicate and deeply emotional process. It was a reunion of a father and son who had been separated for 60 years by a secret. A reunion that brought with it a flood of emotions: regret, sadness for lost time, and a profound sense of connection. Thomas was heartbroken by the knowledge of the son he never knew, the life he had missed. David was grappling with the reality of a father who had been unknowingly absent from his life. Their relationship was new, complex, layered with the history of a secret that had shaped both their lives in profound ways. The story of the music box, the hidden compartment, the cryptic note, the lost son, the buried truth. It was a testament to the enduring power of secrets, the unintended consequences of choices made in the past, and the possibility of finding truth, connection, and a form of healing, even after 60 years of silence and deception. My life, which began with a hidden secret and a lost memory, had been profoundly changed by the music box. I had uncovered the truth about my son, connected with him, and facilitated a reunion with his biological father. The void I had unknowingly carried for decades was filled with the complex, sometimes painful, but ultimately rich tapestry of my hidden past and the unexpected connections of the present. The music box sits on my dresser now, no longer just a beautiful antique, but a symbol of a hidden history, a reminder of a secret kept and a truth revealed. Its melancholic melody, once haunting, now carries a different tune, a tune of remembrance, of connection, and of a family finding its way back to a form of wholeness, piece by piece. Guided by the echoes of the past and the enduring power of love, forgiveness, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how long it has been buried, my son, the baby from the locket, was no longer a secret. He was a part of my life, a tangible connection to a past I never knew I had, a reminder that even when the music stops, life finds a way to compose a new melody, filled with unexpected harmonies and the quiet beauty of truth finally revealed.